you for attending today. This meeting of the Town of Camden Harbor Committee on Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 is called to order. This is a public meeting. Minutes are recorded. The meeting is broadcast on Zoom and recorded for YouTube replay. Please turn on your microphones. Public commenters, please step up to the microphone when speaking. Please direct your comments through the chair and keep your comments on point and concise. Today we have everyone in attendance, all active members of the committee, except for Sandy Welty. We have 4 regular voting members present. So today we will have an alternate member sit in as a voting member, and today is your day, Stephen Gold.
Can I make a comment before we get to public statements?
Yes.
Just to take note that last week, Marlene Libby passed away. Marlene was the town's harbor secretary for years and years, going back before broadcast, where she would sit in on every meeting. She was just a valuable addition to the Harbor Committee.
Well,
Thanks, Steve.
yeah, thank you, Steve.
Can I add to that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Yeah, for the first 14 years of me taking office, Marlene was the harbor clerk. And she did a lot to shape the harbor. You know, she's that behind the scene kind of energy, helping me write up stuff. And, you know, Steve, you can't put it like that, right? You know, changing my paragraphs and stuff and helping me out with writing stuff. So she was a good friend, and she was a great asset to the town and the harbor.
Oh, not to pry into details, but has she been sick?
Yeah, she
was.
had very aggressive cancer.
I don't know if that came on before or after she retired.
Before.
The past 2 years. She worked right up until the day, pretty much.
Oh, well. Okay. All right, proceeding on with public comments on non-agenda items.
Thank you. I'm Michael Scaling. I'm head of the Curtis Island Lighthouse Foundation. And as you know, our focus is to raise money to help restore the buildings on the island. And I just wanted to bring you up to date on a couple of things. In February, we held 2 sessions of a visioning session, public comment, public visioning, to create a kind of a picture of what would the island look like, 5 years down the road if you were to go away and come back and everything was fixed up. What would you see? What would you be wanting to see? So the visioning sessions, we had a total of, I think, 57 people in the 2 sessions. We did a summary. We basically transcribed all the comments that were made, did a summary, and then came up with some themes. And we're in the kind of the process of seeing what the public so far has said. But the thing that I want to say is we are expanding that. So anyone in town, including all of you, would love to hear your comments. You go on our website, it's curtisisland.org, and it'll take you right to a visioning. It's kind of 3 questions, and pen them in, send them in. You can either print a copy or just do it electronically. And then all of the ones that come in, we're going to just keep adding, adding that to the database that we have. And it's starting to spell out kind of a picture of where the public sees the island and how they want to see it. So that was one thing. The second is there's money in the budget this year, and our focus is going to be on fixing, restoring, protecting the upper part of the light tower. So all the metal work and primarily the roof, because the roof is failing, it's rusting, and we need to get to it before it's gone, and hopefully it's restorable. You know, it was a year ago, and so we want to do that. And so the money in the budget, this $50,000, will be earmarked or pointed toward that. The town will go out for bids on that. And then the second area is the foundation. If we can raise the money, we want to do a new roof on the caretaker's house. More shingles blew off over the last few weeks. Haven't seen it in the last day or two, but I'm going to try to get out there and see if there's any damage inside. But it's in dire need of a new roof and a new roof structure. And by that, I mean all the trim boards, gutters, you know, all that upper part. And so our goal would be to do that this year and then protect the rest of the building. You know, the clapboards going down need paint and everything, but that would be protected so there's no more, at least, leakage. And then the second year, we would go for the rest of the building, the rest of the exterior of the building. So I just wanted to bring that up. We're still under discussion around access to the island, and there's, I think, a lot of decisions to be made there. The first thing will be the stairs that are, one set is out, the other set is sort of on its way. We repaired it. Steve helped repair that from the kayak beach, repaired that last year. And so this is a good chance to kind of redesign them so that maybe we could slide equipment up or winch stuff up. But that's where we are. I just wanted to let you know. And so we'll be talking to you and coming back and saying, this is what our definitive plan is.
Michael, is the summary online? on
The
your
summary isn't yet. We haven't posted it yet because we're still adding, we still want to add. But the summary in general, it said, keep it natural, you know, protect it. Don't let it get overrun with too many people, destroying both the ambiance of it and the actual physical environment. So it was very much, how do we protect this gem that we have here? And Susan, you were at one of them. I don't know if you had any comments or.
Yeah, I attended the second of the sessions on that snowy afternoon, which was great. A really engaged group of people. And I think the overall consensus that I heard coming out of that discussion was to, again, minimize impact, that the restoration would be sort of stepped and with an eye to preserving the iconic look, but not, the function of the space hasn't really been, you know, I think somebody brought up a really good corollary of Beach Hill and how there's a structure that's been restored, but it's only open on occasion. It hasn't got, you know, it's not available for all kinds of functions. It retains that iconic piece of architecture without requiring staffing and constant maintenance because it's being used heavily, which I thought was an interesting way to frame it. And then Michael and Kathy Dupree, who's on the board, Audra and I met last week and talked more about access, with an eye to sort of minimizing, if we put a bunch of floats out there, it's inevitable that there's going to be a lot of traffic. So I think that there was some soul searching on that score in terms of how to do the work without creating just an open season on tying up bigger boats out there and so on. So, obviously there's fundraising that needs to be done by the foundation, but I think we came up with some better, somewhat clearer parameters for what the next steps would be, and manageable financially and human resources wise and so on to take next steps.
Okay, very good. Thank you for your comments today, Michael.
I'm gonna have to leave early today, but I wanted to see you all.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our next item, our meeting minutes. We have meeting minutes from January 14th that were revised. And wonder if anyone has any comments about those minutes? Okay.
Did you pass out a copy or is that?
It was on the email.
Well, it's in the email. We have today's minutes. Copies were distributed. And it includes the statement, the Harbor Committee passed a motion 5-0 directing that a memo outlining the recommendations be prepared and sent to the Select Board, the Town Manager, and the Harbor Master. I believe that was the omission from the original version of the minutes. Those are today's minutes, or February's minutes there that you have.
I think they're both.
Are they both in there?
They were both in the email.
Well, they're both in the email, but it could be that only,
I printed out both of them.
oh, you did, okay.
So those are from,
Oh, all right.
I don't know which ones he's looking at.
Okay, and then also we have minutes from the February meeting. Any comments on those minutes?
I would just like to note that in the minutes of February 11th, there's inconsistency in the spelling of Michael Scaling's name, where it's K in some places and C in others.
It is K.
It's K.
Oh.
Join the club, Michael.
Yes,
I've done mine too.
yes, all right. That is our, can we call that an AI function? Mm-hmm.
Correct in most places and then wrong in one.
I do see it in one.
Yeah.
Where it's misspelled.
Wondering how it gets so detailed.
Okay. Any other comments on February's minutes? January's minutes? Very good. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from January and February?
So moved.
A second.
Sure.
Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes?
Very detailed.
Yes. Janice provides an AI-generated summary of the meeting. And it is sometimes, it is very comprehensive. And sometimes there are some, maybe a little bit of confusion and perhaps even an outright error now and then. So they do need to be gone through carefully and made sure. But that summary is helpful in preparing the minutes.
What is it generated from? The video or?
Zoom.
Zoom does a recording.
Okay.
Types it up.
Yeah, Steve, you got to remember that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
So.
Is that a bad thing?
But
Is that a bad thing?
that's for you to decide.
Yeah.
I prepared these minutes, the revision to January and February's, and I did it by looking at the summary, the Zoom summary, but I also watched the meetings again in order to make sure that nothing was overlooked and that things were stated correctly. Okay, so all those in favor of the minutes for January and February? Very good. 5-0. Okay. Next item, we had a committee resignation, as I'm sure you're all aware. Mark Siegenthaler has resigned effective February 14. And Janice, I wonder if you could explain to us the replacement process as it's practiced.
Yeah, right now, because we're getting close to when we do our annual appointments in July anyway, I would just say that for the remainder, one of your alternates can act as a regular member. And then in July, the select board will have all of their committees when they renew, and they'll get a list of names, and we'll reappoint someone at that time. Because you really have a quorum anyway, we should have still have 4 members. The only time it really creates a problem is if you don't have enough members for a quorum. So if you have 3 or less, then that would be a problem. But this close to the June deadline, I would wait, because their term would just expire in June anyway, so you're better off just waiting and doing June.
I'm not familiar with what Mark's term
I'm not
was.
sure either, that person will stay in that position, but
He might have been reappointed last
I think he
July,
might, I think he was. So I think he's still got 2 years left.
so he still has 2 years left. Uh-huh.
Did Mark give a reason?
Well, he's leaving town.
I think he moved, yeah.
And,
Really?
Yeah.
Where's he moved to?
New
Thousand
York?
Islands area.
What area?
Thousand Islands.
I don't think he's moved quite yet.
No, but
No.
he has purchased property there.
No, he's,
Well, it's interesting because I had a misdirected Amazon package that I had to go find at 259 Mountain Street, only to discover that it was the house I lived in for like 4 years when I first moved to Camden. But it looked very different under Mark's stewardship.
That's a long overnight delivery.
They had the right number, wrong street.
yeah, so Mark stated in his resignation, he felt it'd be appropriate for him to step down. So, and Susan, do you concur with Janice's
Oh, sure.
summary of the process?
Janice is the reigning expert.
The reigning-
on all things.
Reigning queen of committee appointments, yes.
Hmm? Okay,
Well, it might behoove all of us to think of potential additions to the committee and talk to them.
oh, absolutely, yes, we should all be recruiters for,
If you know somebody, encourage them to fill out the paperwork.
uh-huh, yeah, yeah. So, as Janice has described, we can designate one of the alternates to step into Mark's seat. And in some of our documents, either the policy, the committee handbook, or the bylaws, it is described that a senior, the senior alternate. And I'm not sure if that's referring.
Is there any reason not to keep alternating the way we've
Well, we
been?
could both be alternates and alternate our voting,
I would suggest that.
Each meeting,
Keep what you
Yeah.
Mhm.
but
because I know
are we
where this is
appointing a
going.
member though? Oh, okay.
Because you guys have to appoint a secretary.
We have to appoint what?
That's coming up next, yes, that's right. We have to replace Mark as the secretary of the committee. Okay, so is that the concurrence of the group here to alternate by meeting?
Yes.
The alternate will step in, okay. All right, that sounds good. Do we need a motion to do that, or do we just
think so.
accept
I
that?
don't think so.
I think that would be
Very
standard
good.
procedure.
That's muddling on.
All right, very good.
Very
So
good at that.
Mark was the committee secretary, and we need to replace Mark. So do we have any nominations for secretary of the Harbor Committee?
I think that, due to these recent documents, that Ron has proved himself to be an adequate scribe and thoughtful writer. I would like to nominate Ron Hawkins.
I'm gonna
Okay.
decline the nomination.
Ron declines the nomination, and those minutes weren't prepared by Ron.
No, I didn't say the minutes, his memos.
Oh, okay.
Well, the memo was actually from Elliot, I think the
I don't
original
know, I've got
memo,
stuff that has Ron's name all over.
the recent one from Ron was the email, just so you know.
That's
mean,
the one I.
Should I take it back and find Ron
No,
I'm just-
inadequate?
What I'm
for the
seeing
job?
here is someone with a great eye for detail.
I'm an alternate
Where's
still,
that
Bob.
finger? Yeah, she's an alternate.
Which way is that finger
I'm
going?
not sure that a secretary.
That's
can do it.
irrelevant.
How about Mike Scaling?
Okay, so Ron has declined the nomination offered by Steve. Any other nominations or self-nominations? In that case, I propose that the minutes be prepared by a committee member every meeting, and every committee member will take a turn. And the basis for selecting the member for any particular month will be alphabetical by last name.
Is there a dice involved with this as well?
No, there's no dice.
Not
It's pretty
yet.
straightforward. Alphabetical by last name. And we'll just go in that order. So everybody would have, with 6 members currently, everybody would be doing the minutes twice a year in theory, but we would expect to have another member in the summertime.
That include both alternates?
Oh, yeah. Includes everybody.
But alternates can't be a secretary. but they
Well,
can
for the
be-
purposes of this temporary, this is a temporary.
Why can't they be secretary?
Yeah.
Alternates
It says so
can't
in
be
the rules
officers.
that
Oh,
Has to be-
somewhere in
the-
one of the,
Yes, committee rules, yeah.
That's
And
right.
Elliot's motion is slightly altered to the minutes will be prepared by, without the use of the term secretary.
Yes.
Could I go back to nominate Bob?
No,
If I could say something, we've been playing around with the minutes and using AI, and it does a pretty darn good job. And like you said, it needs, just read them, change stuff up, but it's a huge start. So you don't have to worry about taking every note. You can participate in the meeting. So it really takes the load off being the secretary or being the minute taker.
And your minutes do not have to go in here. All that's really required is attendance and actions of the board. The discussion can be really brief, because we've got the videos on YouTube forever. So we have the audio recording, which kind of takes the place of that. So that makes the decision a little easier as well.
Yeah, I would suggest
They don't
that
have
not
to
everything that
detail
comes,
the A1.
not everything that's AI generated
No.
has to be included.
No. You can just
A lot of
In-
strikeouts.
Indeed, but you could eliminate a lot of,
I mean, looking at those, I thought, I don't remember all this stuff, but I guess someone does.
Usually if you look at the top and there's a part that says the summary, that pretty much is like one paragraph that is pretty accurate about what we talked about.
Okay. So do we all agree? We'll take turns
Yes.
by last name. That puts Stephen Gold. No,
No.
actually Liz
where's
Joy.
first?
Liz
I'm happy
Joy.
to try it, and if I, and see, take a stab at it. I'm happy to continue if it seems like something I can do well.
Uh-huh. Okay, very good. All right, Liz, thank you. So Liz will prepare the minutes for this meeting.
Where do I find this AI stuff?
Well,
Does it just kind of pop into my head and I take over?
Janice-
Go see Janice.
Okay, great.
Elon Musk will send you a virtual.
Or you put a chip right in my head, it comes right down there.
And you
Okay.
can write it in the form of 5 bullet points that we did.
We had a great secretary when I was on the board at People Place, and her minutes were really concise and clear. I'm gonna take a look at hers. so.
Okay, well, so, moving on, Harbor Master Report.
Well, hello, everybody. So I've been spending some time with Dave St. Laurent in his office and to get ready to rebuild Steamboat Landing. And as you probably saw, we have the new concrete stacked and ready. We've been talking to a couple people. What we want to do is every other joint where the new concrete is fastened to each other, we want to try to put a helix anchor down with eyes. And then we're still figuring out if we're going to use a shackle or maybe just put a cable across both of them and winch it down. You know, we're not.
What's the helix? Anchor
Screw.
It's a
big screw.
Yeah,
Going down.
it goes down. It goes down with it. Now, that's what we have to determine. I mean, Dave. This was Dave's idea, and I think it's a good one as long as we can figure out. Because when this was built a while back, the bedrock underneath it, if it has big pieces and chunks of debris, it's going to be hard to get those helix down. So we've got a couple contingency plans if for some reason that doesn't work. But and I agree with him, I think that it'd be a good thing to do so water can't get underneath these things during a storm. Even though they're so much bigger than the last ones, we feel it would add to its resilience. That being said, I've been talking with Fire Chief to figure out what we have left from the FEMA money for this project. It gets a little convoluted because we had a December 24th storm, we had a January 25th storm, then we had another January storm before that, and we're getting a little bit of money from each for different reasons, so it gets confusing. But we're ready to go in about, was it the 27th? I think the 27th of this month, we're gonna pull the trigger. We've got a really low tide to get down to tie it into the last section. So that's exciting. Toby Winkelhofer, just refresh your memory, was the one that got the bid to rebuild the new floats. I'm gonna go see him today actually and see how that's going. I think they're pretty much done or close to it.
Are those all replacement or just some replaced?
No, they're all replaced. They're all brand new. The old floats We still don't know exactly what we're doing. I know Mike Scaling has come to me a couple times and come up with the idea of maybe we could put it temporarily at Curtis Island so they could more easily get product to the renovation of the lighthouse. That's not concrete yet. I had another idea to put it at the head of the harbor, tee it off from the Library Park schooner dock system for kayaks and stuff like that.
How many are there? Is it 4?
There's 8.
8?
They're 6 by 20, I think.
Wow.
8 by 20.
8 by 20. They're big floats. Now, I think like I showed Mike, I did some every year towards the end of the life of those, we would have to do something to beef them up a little bit because they were getting a little loose. They're egged out and everything, but they could still the town could still, I think, benefit from them for at least another 6 years if put in a less hostile environment like Steamboat Landing. So yeah, that's where that is.
Steve, are you anticipating one helix per the joints that you're going to try and screw down, 1 or 2?
Well, you'd be 1 on each side. Remember there's
2.
Yeah, so 2. And I
Okay.
think we want to do it not every joint, but every other joint. Again, if we got to see how it goes.
Mhm.
Those slabs are going to be 2 across. Overall width of the ramp will be 2 slabs.
Correct.
New ones are longer.
Yeah, 15 feet long.
I've been over there at Steamboat recently and the old slabs are all tossed around. Was that more storm
Yeah.
damage? When did that occur?
I think it was about 2 weeks ago. They're moving them today to get them a little more level. Just to, there's a big excavator that's going to be loaded onto Two Harbor Marine barge. So they actually asked me yesterday, when our barge goes in there, can we just move a couple so we can, to help us? I said, yeah, in 2 weeks, we're getting rid of everything. So they're going to be just flattening things out, making it a little easier for the next
There's an
week.
excavator sitting over there now.
Yeah.
Huh. So I'm not remembering a big storm 2 weeks ago.
I think there was, that's when.
We've had one significant southeasterly.
Yeah.
I only remember it because it was mentioned somewhere, but
And did that coincide with a
I could not tell you.
significant high tide?
I have no recollection.
Huh.
Well, that would make sense because I found someone's brand new float on our beach in North Haven yesterday. And it had to have happened in the last week or 2.
Well, lucky you.
Nope. Come and get it.
Can I comment, Elliot?
Sure.
Just a couple of observations is looking at those new slabs, the tabs with the holes in them where they're supposed to be bolted to each other, bolted together. They're quite long. There's going to be about 4-inch space between, or maybe a little more than that, 4 or 5-inch space between the slabs, which to my mind is invitation for turbulence to find its way into the structure. Probably too late to make any change about that now, but so I guess they'll probably go together the way they are and we'll see what happens. The slabs are 6 inches thick, not 8. I just wanted to throw that out there. They're only the same, they're the same thickness as the previous slabs. So in fact, they're individually more heavy than the individual pieces that were there, but as a whole, they're not any more heavy. They're basically the same thickness. So we haven't added any weight to the total structure. And the helical concept seems to me that it's going to be difficult at best. I just can't see that happening. Can't see that that's, well, my take on it is that trying to drive helical coils down into that riprap, it's going to disturb the riprap, which is going to be counterproductive. It would be, ideally, that riprap should be vibrated or driven on, or, I heard at one point the riprap was going to be replaced. I don't quite understand the point of that. I mean, riprap is riprap unless the intent was for it to be smaller pieces of stone, which one might argue that's a concept worth doing, but that seems like a really expensive process. Removing all the riprap that's there and replacing it with new riprap is going to be a expensive process. The challenge with the helical coils is going to be getting them to line up with the connections between the slabs. That's just from a practical perspective, that's going to be really difficult. And to address the issue of where the floats go, the old floats that are being removed, I would be very cautious about adding traffic to the situation at the head of the harbor. That windjammer access there was provided by the library committee, and it was a very carefully considered decision as to whether or not to do it at all, because of the impact of vehicular and pedestrian traffic in the park, which ultimately the decision was made to let it go ahead. So, there were 3 windjammers that needed a place to sail from, and so that was the solution at the time. And the the library committee went along with it. And we were, in my time there, we were very careful to not abuse that, what we considered an extreme privilege. So adding traffic to that ramp system, I think, is basically a breach of that confidence that we established with the library committee at the time. I think imposing additional traffic, there's going to be additional burden for parking on Atlantic Avenue. If you're going to provide access to those additional floats with all of the kayaks or dinghies or whatever you determine is appropriate to be tied to them, that's a huge traffic increase over what exists down there now. So I think that should be considered very, very carefully, so that those windjammers don't lose their privilege because we've overextended that generosity on the part of the library committee. So I think that's a discussion that we should have as an agenda item. I don't think that that's something that should be taken casually.
And state this agenda item, please.
Discussion regarding increased traffic.
Additional floats.
Yeah, additional floats
Is this something you would anticipate working with the library committee on anyway?
Well, so 8 years ago when I was talking with Ken Gross about putting kayak racks on the actual physical grass, we had at their meeting, they were they didn't mention anything about, although Ron might be right on this, but at that time they didn't have no concerns about additional traffic. They just didn't think it would look aesthetically pleasing for what they were going for Library Park to have aluminum racks. So that's why I came up with the idea as well. What if we just put an extra floats there that we could still get what we have to figure something out for new areas for dinghy racks. But yeah, well, obviously I wouldn't willy-nilly, we should have some meetings with the library to see if, if that's something they would be amenable to. And if not, we then could figure out a different strategy. But yeah, good.
One other comment I'd make is that the beach has eroded to such an extent that it's mostly stones there now. It used to be predominantly sand. There were a few rocks sticking up through the sand, but because we've dredged so far up into the head of the harbor, that beach, the fines have washed out of that beach. So you're not grounding those floats out on sand or a smooth surface. It's
Yeah,
stone.
Yeah.
Those floats aren't gonna be grounding out level. They're gonna be, when the tide goes, it's gonna put a lot of strain on the floats themselves, and you're only gonna have access to dinghies and kayaks on a tidal basis.
exactly. And Ron, so the idea, this is the length of the actual float, and at the very end is where the schooners are. This is the actual grass. I would have it so, I envisioned it that as soon as you get off that aluminum ramp that gets you to the actual floats, it would tee off to the right and be pretty close to the actual granite wall. And I was envisioning Billy Glover or someone doing a aluminum rack. So, you'd walk down, pick up your kayak, and they would obviously be on the ground for a good part of it because it's low tide. And so you'd get your knapsack and you drag it, and we would have to do a little bit of cleaning out. Like Ron says, there's boulders. I'm amazed. When I first got here, we used to ground the schooners out there, paint them. And now there's a lot of big rocks, not so big that you couldn't move them out of the way. They're not the football size, but so yeah, that was the idea. But it's definitely worth, for starters, going back to the library and saying, here's an idea. Would you be, because we'd have to figure out if someone had a permit, we'd have to say, you can't park on Atlantic. You'd have to have some restrictions, and because it'd be foot traffic to get to your kayak. So
Well, it's already going to be lots of parking restrictions.
yeah, that's right.
To Gaff.
Well, that's what we need to do. It's when that's what the committees are for. We need to look at all the issues with the impact this would be, the necessity of this, and be working with the other factions that are involved, like the library committee and stuff like that.
So Steve, you're not gonna go throw those floats over there?
No.
Okay.
For sure. The reason I brought it up was because, maybe we might decide after discussion that Mike Scaling's request for these floats to go over there is a better use of them. So.
Well, and I would just like to weigh in. Audra is not a fan of the floats going out to Curtis Island. That was sort of the upshot of that discussion. So I think there's a lot more procedurally that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Before, we can't make any decisions here about it.
No, but we could definitely
more
discuss
involved.
those tangential issues to help Audra and the other people figure out the best thing to do. Another thing is I put another aluminum kayak rack and dinghy rack at Lake Beach, and it's been met with pretty good ovation. Maybe there's a way we could put another one there because it keeps growing. There's too many dinghies and kayaks. Since I made the one at Marine Ave, and people have come to me while I'm shopping going, oh, thanks so much for putting that there. I live down the street and it's great. And so it's good for us to think about other areas that people could put their kayaks down and not be so much where the waterfalls are. Because as you guys know, there's a ton of dinghies, and that should be for folks that need to get out to their boats that have moorings, that one area. And then the other kayak rack could just be for folks that have kayaks.
Susan,
Could I ask why Audra opposes bringing some of those floats out there?
Well, I think it's mainly because of the amount of traffic that it's going to open up and the overall, like, long-term management, if you will, of Curtis Island as it is now, the resources used by people who can get out there with a boat or who have, know about it. That's what's kept it sort of, preserved in its natural state. Not that there's an intention to restrict people from going there, but I think that there's that opening up that door to just that much increased traffic is going to lead to consequences that are going to require more maintenance, more oversight,
More management,
more management,
which
trash-
is a discussion,
maintenance.
which is a discussion that's been going on since I took office. And this committee traditionally was under the tutelage of Willard White, the esteemed Willard White. Boy, they did not want any more people on that island. I remember them, I think, as harbor master, I would just kind of like sit back and kind of review what the census was of the community. I think it's an amazing asset. And I think if you could manage it where people, can enjoy it more, but at the same time, make sure it's not being overused and abused, I think would be great. I'm not sure if that means you'd have to hire someone from Parks and Rec to be out there a lot more, to be like, hey, you're not on the trail. Hey, isn't that your trash right there? There's going to have to be stuff like that. So it doesn't get, the island doesn't get hurt.
I guess I thought the floats were more for your group to a temporary basis.
Yeah, and-
The floats from Steamboat, I thought was more like, let's get these out there to help get this work done, but maybe they wouldn't be open to the public. That, I guess that was kind of what I thought.
Yeah.
I think Curtis Island access is a big enough issue that maybe we should make that an agenda item at some point and try to come to a harbor committee consensus view of what should go on the island.
I think it's a good idea.
You've got at least two different things working here. You've got the short term, or however long
Right.
the project goes, and if the project is staged over the time that it takes to do the fundraising and continue to really flesh out the plan.
Right, they're there.
Do you keep something there on a semi-permanent basis, which opens up a level of access that there hasn't been up until now? So I don't think there isn't a clear framework for it, because we just don't, the plan isn't all in place. If I know that we had discussed in our meeting last week that there is a possible RFP going to go out for some of the immediate work that needs to be done, and would require, at the minimum, a good solid
Landing.
staircase with maybe, the ability to slide materials up. We've got this, I bought an outhouse, a solar outhouse to put out there that I've donated to the island. That's going to require, at the least, block and tackle some way to get this thing up. It's heavy. But even that time frame will create an opportunity for bigger boats and more people. And so it's not that the intent is to restrict, it's just, it's a very kind of, it's a dilemma right now that I think that, philosophically, what is the feeling? Even your discussion about so many more kayaks and canoes, creating that opportunity will create a lot more traffic, because those small boats can land even without additional floats out there. But if you're facilitating all that on the harbor side, how does it? So it's just a philosophical question that the town has to really grapple with, and
I think
I
that
don't think we're
the
there yet.
parallel to Beach Hill is excellent. You improve the buildings, which draws people, but you have to walk up there. Now, it's not climbing Mount Batty or whatever, but you got to do some effort. And I completely agree that I don't want to see Curtis Island with a bunch of 19-foot Makos tied up there. But the parallel I'd make is that the kayaker or a rowboat that can pull in there and then do a little walk around or have a picnic, whatever, that makes it more like Beach Hill where you sort of earn your access.
I tend to agree with that.
And that was one of the themes that came out, is by keeping it natural. And one of the thoughts that we've had is the access is an issue. You know, there are people in the community, many people that have never been out. And one of the things we thought is if we had floats or some safer way to get people off a larger boat onto the island, that it's all in how these floats are managed, and it will take some management, some signs. But one thought we had was open it up, you know, some Sundays or 3 or 4 days in the summer to let people take a larger boat to be dropped on this safer ramp to get up, and then manage it and put regulations in place. And I know it's not a simple thing, but just to avoid having tour boats, you know, drop a lot of
Many years
people.
ago, when I was on the Harbor Committee, we sponsored a Curtis Island Day.
Yeah.
Before tourist season.
Mhm.
And the response in the community was huge. You know, people who'd never been out there. And then it just got to an incredible magnitude when some lighthouse group put it online.
Yeah.
I love that, having, you know, getting people who aren't gonna, I mean, I got a call this weekend from somebody who wanted to go out to Curtis Island. And I kind of had to tell him, well, you
Yeah.
gotta figure out a way to
Get a
get there.
wetsuit.
You know, I say,
I have,
I
yeah.
don't know if they're renting kayaks anymore, but you know, so there's a little bit of work to be done.
And I
kind of
think,
earn your turn there.
I think if the town went to Warren Island, looked at Warren Island as an example, because I think we've all been to Warren Island. You know, they've got a big float system there, and but they also have a full-time, you know, ranger that's there making
They
sure
also have a money box.
they have a money box. Yep. But anyway,
Anyway, I
that's
think we're having the meeting that I proposed we have.
that's right.
You know, at some later time. But I want to say one more thing about the floats. And that would be that if you're talking about, not the floats, the ramp, if you're talking about anchoring every other one, I think it would just be critical to have anchors at the end of the last one.
Down deep.
Yeah. Just so in a real storm condition, you know, the surge wouldn't be able to get under 2 rows of floats and start lifting them from the bottom.
Well, that makes sense. So you guys have seen the fact that the way down deep, they look like the day we put them in. Maybe that's just because of the average of the fact that there's usually a lot of water there and it's not affected by the storm. And then if you look, there's the higher you come up, basically is the
The worse they are.
the worse they are.
Well, at an extreme low water, how much water would you say is over where the end of the ramps are going to be?
A foot,
Just a foot.
2 foot and a half. I mean, it gets 2 feet maybe at max. But to be honest, and to compliment Ron and what he had said, I totally agree with you, Ron. I've had a discussion with Rick when he brought this up. This was his idea, and I originally was like, you know, I'm not sure if that's going to work. I'm not sure how much it would help for sure. But in my head, I was like, I've seen, you know, when Rob Isbert used to drive these things for anchors, for moorings, you know, I hit this, there's a rock down there, restart it. Or, you know, you want it here, but it shifts because it had to get around a rock. I said, I could see this being a real royal pain in the butt. But as of right now, it's still the plan. I mean, another idea was to get a machine and take two big rods at angles like this, just something to help keep it down. I mean, the people that have done this other harbors, they didn't do that, but this was more of like an extra thing for us because of the fact that it's southeast facing. But the last one lasted 20 years before started. I mean, you get a big storm and it's going to come up. So, but remember, my first year was the first year that we had that system. And I remember the committee was like, well, you got to be careful. Make sure you take those floats out anytime it's going to blow southeast. I mean, they were nervous about this because it was this committee through a lot of, and you might remember, Steve, that they did a lot of work to get that in place. The revised steamboat lane. They didn't have floats there before that. So
Challenge my memory.
There was no ramp. We just went down and cleared the rocks off the beach every spring.
yeah, that's a great asset for sure. So yeah,
Steve, regarding the ramp and putting in the new slabs, I think it would be prudent to seek out a professional engineer to design an anchoring system for those slabs and an engineer who is experienced in that application.
well, we have an engineer and an engineering diagram for this new system. It's already been engineered. This was an extra step to try to anchor it. So that's not. I'm not sure. I can talk with Dave today to see if the engineer has been like, well, yeah, go ahead and do that. It's extra. It'll make it stronger. But it is an engineered plan. I mean, St. Laurent's not going to do something without getting it engineered.
Who was the engineer?
I forget his name, but we have the papers. I can.
Is it local?
No, I don't think he's local, but he's close. Portland, probably.
Uh-huh. And then the engineer has prepared a drawing for installation of the slabs.
Correct.
I think it'd be good that you shared that drawing with the harbor committee.
Yeah. Okay. I'll get that from Dave. I can either send it to you via email, whatever, because
Sure. Yeah, that would be good. Regarding disposition of the old floats, I ask that you keep the harbor committee updated on developments for plans or intent for disposition of those floats.
yeah.
Could I just make a quick comment?
Quickly, please.
Everybody's heard me say this before. Regarding kayaks and canoes, the intent, the purpose behind their design is that they're small enough that they can be transported easily on the top of your vehicle or in the back of your pickup or dragged down the street on a pair of wheels. Providing access for an endless number of kayaks and canoes doesn't seem like a worthy objective. I mean, the more space we provide for kayaks, the more kayaks we're going to have to be looking at. And sure, it's a source of revenue. You get X number of dollars for each registration. It's one of those things, but at what cost? You know, the aesthetic imposition of these bright colored plastic items that keep appearing everywhere on our coastline. I don't think that's a cause that's justifies the additional income.
You're talking about the racks?
I think whatever space we provide for kayaks and canoes is going to get filled.
Right, but the racks, not the ability to get them in the water at Steamboat Landing or other
Well, my
places.
point is that we're providing racks for something that was intended just by design to be carried and moved around. You take it home when you're finished using it. You don't impose it on the public. I don't see that the public has an obligation to provide endless amounts of space for more kayaks and canoes. I mean, dinghies are one thing. If people are actually rowing out to their mooring, and a dinghy, you can actually carry some coolers and picnic baskets and other people. It's a much more traditional and efficient use of the space that's being occupied at our facility.
I firmly support the three of us who do row out to our moorings.
Right. Well, I understand it's become more and more rare, but the other challenge that we have is how many dinghies, kayaks, canoes are being imposed on our facility, but aren't being used. They're full of water. And they don't have oars in them. People can't leave their oars in anymore because they get stolen. So we have that problem. But anyway, I mean, I just don't see that this policy of providing an endless amount of storage space for kayaks and canoes is a worthy goal. I think the imposition on the aesthetics is just too great a loss.
Well, I think there's a parallel to, guy that built all the bridges in New York, and they amortized a bridge out to Long Island, and it would take 30 years to pay. They paid for it about like a year and a half because the demand gets immediately filled, and then you're still waiting in a traffic jam. So the more racks, they will get taken, and I think run. Although now that I'm switching from rowing shells to kayaks, I realize how hard it is actually to solo kayaks from the roof to the water, etc. But that's the way it used to be done for the most part. It's only in the last 10 years or so that you started to see all the racks up at the lake or Lake Beach, etc. It used to be off the top of the car and into the water.
Right. So
Yeah,
the point is that you provide the space and it will get filled. You know, but
But not necessarily going out all the time.
But they're not all of those people aren't gonna, there's not enough room for them to all get rowing dinghies either. So, and yeah, I think it's a really interesting,
Well,
I
it's a-
hadn't thought of that, but then there's also a piece
the
of the access for,
challenge that we have in every aspect of the management of the harbor, and that is that we're trying to manage a limited resource. It's a compromise, and it's what national parks are faced with. Their mandate is to provide access, but yet maintain the natural environment. Same discussion we're having about Curtis Island. If you provide additional, easier access that, and access is not limited because of the rise and fall of tide now. You can land a kayak on the beach at any tide. So
Well, we could have,
you're
I'm
only
thinking
going
of
to be
the
able to
opportunity
tie,
of having a,
excuse
just a
me,
drive-up situation.
you're only going to be able to, you're going to provide a space for a boat that's bigger than a kayak and impose that on the island and impose that on the infrastructure. I mean, there's a third option for these floats. We could sell them. We're not obligated to make use of them just because we have them left over.
Steve, do the floats have market value?
Well, anything's got market value. I mean, they've got the black tubs. So yeah, I'm not sure what that value is, but
And is there a market?
I mean, yeah,
Demand.
I mean, sure.
Used
There's,
floats.
I would imagine that, another community would say, yeah, well, I mean, they're decently built floats and they've lasted quite a while. They're definitely showing their age, as you guys know. That's why we got new ones. They lasted 20, I think to get 24 years out of a float system, which is, subject to the vicissitudes of, the southeasterlies here. I mean, I think they did pretty well. I think we were lucky to get that. But yeah, I think you could sell them for sure. I'll buy one.
does Toby have any interest with lake? Doesn't he do lake? Are they lake?
I mean, he might
You,
for sure,
They're also a lot higher off the water than, say, our
That's true.
dinghy floats. Anyway, Ron, I just want to point out, I mean, I agree about, plastic multicolored kayaks in terms of traditions of Camden. But I also want to point out that we really have an aging population for which it is not so easy to unload a kayak every time they want to go kayaking.
I agree, Steve. There's a piece of access of some of those. I mean, I have a mother who she doesn't kayak in the ocean, but she loves to kayak, but she can't lift a heavy dinghy or even, they make these kayaks so lightweight. And I agree with the aesthetic piece as well, but there is a point to people who aren't going to get access to the water otherwise, using that as a way to get access.
Well,
And
we
people-
could find some teenager to have a job
there you go.
at Steamboat Landing to be the loader and unloader
Nice.
for $10 a pop.
I think we'll get a lot more agenda here.
Yeah, I think we
Yes.
should move on.
Yes, okay. And Stephen, regarding Curtis Island being an agenda item for the committee, I propose that you prepare a statement that describes the scope of work for the committee to address and perhaps an outline of specific issues.
Okay.
And
I'm not saying this would be ready for the next meeting because I'm thinking that it would be good for me to have an opportunity to read the summary when
For
it
sure.
becomes available.
And you were I believe, voluntold about being the committee liaison to the Curtis Island Foundation and their activities. So it all,
Concerning access.
whatever. Yes. Okay,
All right.
good.
I think that we should not just be our own echo chamber on this, though, that the Curtis Island group, the select board, town staff are all apparently already churning these issues too. And I
Definitely.
think that we ought to know what the conversation is and where people are at before we independently just
100%.
invent it.
Right, very good. Stephen, do you have anything? Steve Pixley, do you have any more Harbor Master
No,
dates for
no, that's
us?
it. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I want to go back and just confirm next meeting date, Tuesday, April 8th. Janice, how's that sound to you? Okay, very good, thank you. Next item is Harbor Channel alignment, which we have had significant discussion about it in the past. And Ron prepared an outline of issues here, and he's copied us with his email here. And yesterday I sent out a draft of a memorandum. And I wonder, let's have a discussion about that.
I will say what I anticipate the unpopular opinion that I don't feel in a position that the idea that the channel and the ordinance should be the same. I have no problem with. And it may be that the way it was worded in the original ordinance is the smartest idea, but I don't feel like I'm in a position to know what the original makers of that alignment were thinking, or that is necessarily the best alignment. So the parts of this that say, we think they were smart and we are endorsing this, I don't. I'm agnostic. I'm not antagonistic in anything. I want to solve the problem. And the problem is that you can't have an ordinance that describes something that all of us can go out there and look at and say, well, that ain't the way it is. And so you've got a problem of moorings that are in the wrong place. I'm just not prepared to say that I would be voting in favor of saying that there's one right way and it was the original way.
There's an ordinance specification for the channel.
Correct. And I agree with that. And we're not in alignment
Do
with
you
it.
want to change that ordinance?
I don't know.
I agree. Can I step in, Bob? I agree too. I think the ordinance and the channel should be correct, but I don't know. Bob, are you kind of what you're saying as in this note, it says that it was made by a group of very experienced mariners. Yes, I'm sure it was.
This is the memo,
But on Ron's,
yes.
just, so I want, personally, I want the ordinance to match the channel, but logically, I don't really care if it's changing the ordinance or changing the channel, whichever one is going to make it safe and navigable and consistent, consistency. But I don't think we should rule out changing the ordinance if that's the best option. You know, I mean, it's not the same. The channel, the way it is right now, is not the same as the ordinance. But if we change the channel to fit the ordinance, I mean, one of the things Ron brought up last time is we want consistency. Well, we're changing it, so that's not consistent, and it's been like that for how many years? So it's kind of contrary there. But I think it makes the most sense in my mind. I mean, I think the channel should be where mariners are seeing it, on the charts, on whatever they're looking at that's telling them where our channel is. They're not looking at a page in our ordinances. Does
Ron,
that make sense?
Ron, what year was the channel defined as per the ordinance? How far back?
I'm assuming it's when that ordinance was originally written, when we first wrote the harbor ordinances, which would have been,
But could the ordinance simply have been adopting what was already there and understood? Or do you think that people literally, whatever that ordinance is, they went out and made a new independent call?
I don't think prior to this ordinance that the channel was marked.
At all? It wasn't, they didn't
don't
even
believe-
have markers.
I don't believe that, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I suspect that the town was not putting channel markers out there. And that was mostly because it just simply wasn't required. There were so few moorings in the outer
I think it
harbor,
was 20 years ago or 40 years ago
40 years ago.
More
More.
20.
More like,
that the ordinance said to the rock from the corner of the dock type
Yeah.
thing.
I'm concerned we're changing the channel to fit a line in a book, and rather than fitting it to what is applicable and logical.
okay, so the question then is, what is the reasoning for altering the channel from how it's described in the ordinance? What's the
I
reasoning?
want to know the reasoning for altering it for what it is now, other than
But
not
that,
matching.
that onus falls on you or Bob. If you want to change the ordinance, then we need to hear reasons for changing the ordinance. Is there a reason that, what is the objective?
I'm not saying it needs to. I'm just saying there's a couple options here. And I don't necessarily know the best option, but I don't think it's fair to say we want to change this because it doesn't match the ordinance, when they're both fluid things that could change.
The purpose of my questions about the time was that if it was 40 years ago, we had a compass that a lot of people don't even know what it looks like anymore, because they basically do navigating by video game, on GPS.
Well, and Tim made that point when he was here. He said that for the most part, we watch the little boat go across the screen now.
Right.
Nobody.
And so in theory,
navigating.
someone could identify the channel by GPS points, and then they would appear on Garmin, et cetera, that
So I don't want
way.
to change it so that it's not, yeah. I wanna know
What I'm
it
saying is,
now.
I honestly don't care, except that I know that it will be upsetting to people whose moorings, where do these moorings go? Then we get into the whole fist fight, and how did they get in the wrong place to start with? And what are the equities? And it's like, well,
That's a management discussion.
But that's a reason
That's a
not to
management
change it, I
issue.
guess.
no, well, that is
That is a reason.
an issue.
It's not a reason. It's an excuse. I'm going to make that a little more.
But that's 40 years ago, there was a reason to have a simple visual line.
And I don't think that that's been diminished to any degree. I think that it would be, that it's incumbent upon us to make provision for people to be able to make an approach to the harbor in a logical manner. When you come in the Northeast Channel, past what they refer to as Northeast Point, and head for the corner of the Yacht Club Wharf, you know you're not going to hit anything. There's not going to be anything in the
Right,
way.
and that is in clear sailing, which we don't need to discuss. In the fog, they don't actually see that. But all I'm saying is, I'm not trying to get into the details of this conversation.
In the fall.
We have a letter that we're proposing to send that says that the committee has an opinion about the enduring virtue of the original description of the channel. And I'm saying I'm agnostic on that. So that's why I don't want to be saying it's the right place. What I do want to say is it is very clear that the ordinance location and the as-built location do not match. And that should be corrected by the select board, presumably in one way or another.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob, so let me, if I understand clearly, here, I've written the channel location described by the ordinance was based on sound logic and with good reason by experienced mariners. You don't agree with that
40
statement?
some
We don't-
odd,
right,
40
and-
some
I
odd.
asked
Yeah.
Bob here, Bob, answer.
I don't know. I assume that, but I'm also
I'm
assuming.
asking if you like the statement or not.
I don't feel the need to go into that statement.
Okay, you don't like it.
I delete it.
You would like to delete it. Okay, very good. Thank you.
I think one of the things that was brought up that really got me thinking last meeting was that, you know, we want people coming in, say somebody came into Camden last year and they want to be able to have a consistent way to come into Camden. We're talking about 40 years ago. So right now it's consistent the way it is. And if we change it, we're making something, it's not consistent anymore. I don't, it seems a little,
Liz,
Channel
we have an ordinance,
right.
right?
Yes,
We have an ordinance that defines a channel line, correct?
yes,
And does the channel align with that?
not
No.
exactly.
Should it?
Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
I think that's.
I mean,
debatable.
there's going to be,
If you look at the two ways that people come into Camden Harbor, Northeast Channel and around Curtis Island, 80% of them are coming from Curtis Island.
True. There's a
And-
stationary
and-
observer there.
And they're probably, trying to create a channel on that basis is, that's even a bigger can of worms than we have. I think clearly there should be a defined passage through the mooring field, but exactly where that is and how it's laid out, I don't have any great clarity on right now.
Okay,
So
the
that's
issue
what
got
we-
started here by the fact that the current channel markers are not in conformance with the ordinance. That's how this discussion got started months ago.
Years.
Now, if we feel that the channel should be somewhere else, should be redefined in the ordinance, that's an entirely different subject here.
Correct.
I thought we wanted the channel to align with the ordinance as it's stated now.
I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. I think I think that is
Okay.
Fits
then
right into
it
our
shouldn't be
job.
a very hard discussion.
our
here.
job description here is that we, as Harbor Committee members, bring to attention those things that we're aware of that other people in town management might not be aware of. We have a familiarity with the harbor as a Harbor Committee and as Harbor Committee members to bring issues exactly like this to the attention of town management so that
And that's what we're doing here.
right, but there is more than one solution. There is the it may
not
not.
not as it stands right now. There
Correct.
isn't.
And we should be articulating strongly that it is not, the as-built is not the way the ordinance reads. This letter and the memo are taking it to a next step, which says, and the ordinance is the right way. I do not
I
have
don't
that
know that.
opinion.
Well,
Okay, let's-
I would just interject that either approach has a process. It's either shifting moorings in order to bring it into compliance, or it's leaving the channel as it currently as built and going through the process of changing the ordinance, which we do all the time in town, whether it has to do with zoning of real estate or, these are things that were created by humans and they change as the environment changes, but there's a process. So if there's a recommendation from this committee to change the ordinance to fit the as-built environment in the harbor, there needs to be a recommendation and a public hearing and a vote in order to enact that change. It's not something that's going to happen as a result of this memo, however well-intentioned and historically based it is. It's just the reality that you're not going to decide that around this table. And it's a much deeper, more engaged process with people who use that waterway and take interest in a public hearing and.
We're
And
not,
And I strongly support the idea that we write a strongly worded letter to the relevant parties that Houston, we have a problem. It's real, it's easy to see, and the solution involves lots of people outside of this room who will have opinions on it. And actually, we can't do anything. I assume that it has to start through the select board to potentially have
You
if
would put a request to the select board that
the select board would decide, we're not getting the ordinance, we want the harbor master to get the moorings right, or start the process of an amendment.
I think, wait a minute.
no, I have my hand up first, Steve. I'm just waiting to
I
get.
had mine up 10 minutes ago and it got tired.
We thought you were working out.
Okay, alphabetical order, gold.
I think we should stick with the ordinance. I think we should have a straight channel. I think that if we start trying to GPS the existing channel that has a slight dog leg in it, that may move every year almost because those are picked up and changed every year or replaced. I also think that it's a lot less hassle to move a few moorings than it is to go through maybe 2 public hearings about this, a vote in a town election, et cetera, that just fix the thing. I don't think it's that big a deal.
Ron,
All I've heard so far is that it's simpler to leave the channel where it is. Or there's an issue that, well, now you're changing the channel. The channel was in compliance up to 20 years ago. So it's not 40 years back that channel has been out of compliance. It was in compliance 20 years ago. The previous harbor master attests to that. He took aerial photographs every year to have a frame of reference that he could show to people, and it was up in the the harbor master's office. Those photographs have gotten dispersed. They're not in the town archives anymore. Mark Siegenthaler has one of them. I think there's one hanging at the Wayfarer office. But at any rate, those photographs that were financed, paid for by taxpayer dollars are not in town archives anymore. That's a side point, and don't ask me why that happens, but it apparently did. But up to the point where the previous harbor master retired, that channel was in compliance. And it has crept out of compliance over the last 20 to 25 years. What I'm not hearing is, okay, so there's that issue that you're referring to, is that now we're changing the channel to bring it into compliance.
No, what I meant, Ron, sorry, I don't mean changing it with the ordinance. I meant physically changing it in the water.
Exactly, I understand. I
Yeah,
understand your
okay.
point. I'm not missing that. And, okay, so, but we're gonna opt to go through, as Steve refers to, the process of changing the description in the ordinance. I haven't heard a reason for that yet.
Well,
There's a good navigable reason.
yeah, Ron, I just want to be clear. I'm not
Let
actually, I think both are important.
Can I finish my
Yeah,
sentence?
sorry.
If there's good, sound reasoning behind changing the navigational channel, I'd like to hear it. I don't know what that is. We've heard excuses that the channel is where it is because it got impinged on by moorings because of a lack of management regarding placement of moorings. Unless there's some other reason, something that implies that you have a logical examination of the facts and you've reasoned that this is better, but we haven't done that. What we have is a just off the cuff. Oh, by the way, it's where it is now because of an excuse that moorings got placed where they shouldn't have gotten placed. So we had to change the channel in order to accommodate for that.
You would also
That's not a reason.
You would lose the simplicity of the physical points that we have, to line up the channel. If we wanted to remap it to a dog leg, what would you have? You'd have to have GPS points.
Mr. Chairperson,
Yes,
Hmm.
Harbor Master.
I think it might be a good time for me to speak up, if that's okay.
Are you finished, Steve?
Steve, can I just say real quick
Oh,
that I
sure.
just want to point out that, Ron, I'm not against this option. I feel it's our job to ask the questions, which is the best way to do this, which is, and it doesn't mean we all have to know those answers immediately and doing the pros and cons. But I don't think to say there's just excuses and off the cuff isn't really fair, because there's several opinions and thoughts that this could go here. But I'm not against changing the channel to go back to how it was to fit the ordinance. I think I also stated that that's important. I just wasn't entirely sure the best way to do that correctly. So I'm not trying to argue with you.
Thank you. Steve, please.
So I guess Ron just said that he hasn't heard a good reason to change the ordinance to meet where the current outer harbor channel is. And so, and before I start this, I'd say I really don't really care if there's a decision like, let's change that and move it so it's exactly where that old ordinance stated it. But I would say that the reason I would give is that when a group of human beings starts to live in an area and then they have an asset they want to use, they find out the best way to use it and they make up rules to do that. Then over the years, things change. That's the dynamic of relationship between a body of water or a bay or a harbor and a bunch of people living and using that asset. Over the last 40 years, things have changed. The big dock where the kids have the dinghies, people come to me and say, "Oh, could we move this dock a little here? Could we do this for the kids and this and that?" And over the years, things just change. And So it's so slow that you don't even realize it. I mean, when Ron brought up the fact that, geez, the harbor does not exactly where it says it is. Look, it says it's supposed to be here. And I agree, it's not where it was. I don't agree that it was like that, before I took over, because when a mooring, again, when people take new moorings out or it's reassigned on that harbor, that line, you got to be careful not to move it. And that's why I brought Tim Galvin to talk about that, about the fact that, it's hard to move a mooring block, on either side of that channel. If it has, moved slightly over the years, it has, but that's to fit a working harbor. Now, has there been any accidents? Is it unsafe? Has there been any other person besides Ron bringing this up? Out of all the people that use this? No, zero. So I would say, pardon me, I'm speaking now. I would say that that's my reason to do that. However, if we want to change that back to the way it was to meet a system that was meeting something 50 years ago, then go ahead, let's do that. Or maybe we could just put something in the ordinance that says, here's where this should be from a line from here to here, or whereabouts, as long as it's a safe harbor. Like, that's one sentence change. But that's up to you guys to bring that, to advise me and the select board on the best way to do it.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
Ron?
Just for clarification, I am not the only person on the planet who has concern about this. I've had numerous people, including the yacht club, numerous yacht club members, numerous day sailors and windjammer owners who have expressed their concern, like, what's going on here? Why is this happening? So no, Steve, I am not the only person that's concerned about this. The other thing I would like to point out is that, okay, things change. As human beings, we inhabit the earth and things change, and we make decisions about how we're going to inhabit this earth going forward. I get that, Steve, and I hear you on that. If there's something that has changed or is changing that requires that we alter the rules that we go by, then let's get together and discuss the rules and change the rules, and then bring our actions into compliance. That sequence of events is out of order in this case. If there were a reason for that channel to be moved, then let's get together and have a conversation about the reasoning behind it. Then go through the process of changing the ordinance, and then change the channel's location. At any rate, all the way through that process, that channel would be in compliance with the ordinance. That would have been the sequence of events that we should follow if our habitation here requires it, as you suggest. It's not the other way around. We don't change the rules. I mean, we don't change our actions and then change the rules to fit our actions.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, I wrote a memo about this issue to be directed to the select board and the town manager and the harbor master. The objection I heard today is references to sound logic and good reason by experienced mariners, and we agree with the drafters of the ordinance. Bob doesn't like that. This memo is based on conversations that the committee has had in prior meetings. We've discussed this issue at length. Previously, it was my impression that we agreed that the channel should conform to the ordinance. We have an ordinance that defines the channel line. Was I wrong in that impression?
You were not wrong that we have an agreement that the ordinance and the as-built should align. The objection I have is that we were stating that we're endorsing.
No, that's out of there. That's out.
Okay, then fine.
That's out.
If
So
the,
let's, what are we taking out?
Pardon me?
We need clarification on what we're taking out in this recommendation.
A statement, the channel location described by the ordinance was based on sound logic and with good reason by experienced mariners. That was a statement that came from you, Ron, and I included that. It came from you.
And that's
Bob
not,
doesn't like that statement, the reference. He's not endorsing what experienced mariners 40 years ago did.
well, it doesn't indicate that we are endorsing it.
the next
It's
sentence
just, it's
does.
basically just a statement of fact. I don't think that's a statement of opinion.
I don't want to debate that issue.
It surely is.
It's a subjective statement.
It surely isn't.
What's it matter who defined it? What does it matter? The
What's
ordinance
opinion is whether or
exists.
not they
It's
were.
your opinion.
Whether or not they were experienced.
Exactly.
Elliot is running the show. here.
Order. It doesn't matter who defined the channel. It's defined, it exists. Whether it was experienced mariners or whomever 40 years ago, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Statement doesn't need to be there.
Okay, then it doesn't matter what our opinion is of it either,
Jeez.
right?
Well, we
No,
could
Ron.
state that there is a divided opinion.
Okay. By the vote
Ron.
that we take.
I am speaking.
Okay.
Thank you. The other statement, we agree with the drafters of the ordinance as to the appropriate location and description of the channel. Okay, that statement doesn't need to be there. It's really meaningless. The ordinance exists. The ordinance defines the channel. It's as simple as that.
Okay. I
If
wrote
it's,
this.
if we think that the channel needs to be somewhere else, that's an entirely different subject. And it's an entirely different process.
May I speak?
Yes, Ron, go ahead.
No, I mean, if you don't want me to, I won't. I just,
If you're going to add something new, go ahead.
nope, I'm not changing any, there's nothing new other than the fact that I wrote this 4 weeks ago and haven't had any feedback from any members regarding how this should be worded. This, I've sent this out 4 weeks ago today. The very day that we had our last meeting and hadn't received as a designated titled first draft and haven't received any feedback at all. Now we're in a situation where at the last, I would have thought this would have been worked out by now.
Well,
but if
Ron,
there
I was going to give
We-
feedback, but you just
we
told
have
me everything was
meetings for-
excuses.
For discussions. That's how I feel.
Right.
And honestly, and we've gotten beyond the level of emotional involvement that I want to have on this, because I like you and respect you, but I don't feel that my agnostic opinion about where the channel would be has been heard. And so when someone puts out a thing to be considered at the next meeting is when I consider that I should express my opinion, which I did. And I'm not saying that, the only thing I disagree about is that we have gone from total unanimous, I believe, agreement that it's not where the ordinance says it should be. And then said, and the ordinance is like the Bible, and it only has one interpretation. And if the select board were to say, boy, we do have a problem here, now I want the harbor committee to hear from people about a possible modification of it. We don't know what that would be. That's when I would consider that we're asking questions and hopefully getting input from people. But right now, we haven't really had input on the substance of where that channel should be. And yet the draft was expressing an opinion, and that's what I had a problem with.
Or they might say, put it back to exactly where it should be.
according to the ordinance. I mean, it's not to say that it's going to change.
Does
But what,
is the channel defined on any chart?
I thought we heard conflicting information about that.
I think that's because there are multiple charts.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
how
mean, my
about-
husband said it gets him where he can see the markers and then he uses, you use your eyeballs.
That's on the computer or?
I could clarify, whether it's paper chart or GPS, but
those privately maintained, we went over this in the previous meeting, those privately maintained marks that the town sets to indicate where the channel is are not on any NOAA charts. The only navigational aids that are on NOAA charts are government-maintained markers.
So, commercial GPS does not show the channel. Would be the
GPS is based on
NOAA?
NOAA charts or vector charts. Vector charts are derived from NOAA charts. They're just simplified.
Okay.
But
so-
neither vector nor NOAA charts have privately maintained
So
marks.
it's a municipally defined and maintained channel. Municipally.
Okay, right. I mean, the government would refer to it as privately maintained, but
Elliot, can I ask you a question?
Stephen, go ahead.
Steve Pixley. If we said, all right, we wanted to align with the ordinance, how many moorings would have to be moved and how big a deal is it?
I mean, I'd have to actually look. I'll try to get my hands on an old chart. And like I said at the last meeting I was at, that I would start meandering that back, as soon as I can. If in the spring, I've already talked to the inspectors and said, look, this thing's got to, it's migrated slightly up to the north, which I don't believe is a problem, and I haven't heard anyone say it's a problem besides Ron. But I don't mind moving it. I don't want to all of a sudden move 100 moorings to do this, because again, I don't believe it's a problem. But I will move it. I will start to move it because that's not an issue to slowly move it back. I don't think it's a problem moving it back to where originally was supposed to be in that ordinance, and I don't think it's a problem now. But again, I was going to this spring, anything I could tweak over 8-10 feet, I was gonna have them do it without impacting the mooring just to the other side of them. And then we could, move the other moorings over slightly on the north side or just leave it a little wider. It's not off by much. So but yeah, I mean, I can look at the thing. We can really look at this and I mean, I'm not debating that, when brought to my attention, I'm like looking at that line, like, okay, hold on. I guess it is a little off, again, I don't think it's a problem, but it does not align 100% exactly where the ordinance is. So it's an interesting thing for you guys to advise me and the select board saying, hey, we just brought to our attention that the actual Outer Harbor channel is a little off and we think it should get moved. Good. I mean, I think you're right. It should be where the ordinance says it is. I mean, some people might say it already is or darn close to it, but let's start. I'm willing to start moving this thing. And I think the select board would say the same thing. Well, what's the easiest thing to do? Change the ordinance or probably to change the channel. But I wouldn't say if it took 30, 40 years to migrate a little bit out of where it is, let's go ahead and start moving it back.
I'm curious, I have a mooring number, but I'm assuming that none of that system was, because my moorings long before the sort of GPS revolution, But does mooring 421 have a GPS location for the stone, or is it just like a general drawing of where the number next to it is, and as long as it's not in the channel, nobody really cares?
No, every mooring point has a lat longe
Oh,
within 6 feet accuracy.
Okay, the memo lists Harbor Committee recommendations for corrective actions and improvements. I'd like to read those and get feedback on that. Channel marker locations are charted and defined using GPS technology. And I'd like to read them all first. Channel marker anchors are upgraded to minimum 1,000-pound mooring stones. Channel marker anchors are installed using GPS technology. Channel markers are upgraded to illuminated (green) winter sticks or comparable. Mooring service providers are given written notification of the restoration of the channel location and that mooring services must be conducted to accommodate the established channel location. The channel markers should remain in place year-round. 6 items. And that all, in addition, we feel that this should commence immediately and completed ASAP. So channel marker locations are charted and defined using GPS technology. Is that reasonable?
yes.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be hard.
Okay. Channel marker anchors are upgraded to 1,000-pound stones.
I have a question about that level of
That
micromanagement.
seems
Sounds pretty
excessive.
heavy to me.
Well, our
Unnecessary.
previous discussions, it was expressed that there could be a variety of anchors, not consistent and possibly not durable enough for the application.
Yeah, and I think that we could, you could choose appropriate wording that would tell the staff, get sufficient permanent, non-moving anchors without getting into the exact poundage or whatever that's required for this.
Yeah, you just use sufficient. Use the word sufficient.
And should they be stones or sufficient anchors?
Sufficient anchors, I think is great, because
What
now,
would be a normal, what's there now?
right now, I've made anchors out of old plow blades, cross,
I mean, just something heavy.
something heavy that won't move.
I think anchors suggest something that's not permanent. And anchors are prone to changing their position depending on which way they're being pulled in. When I mentioned just off the cuff, mushroom anchors, Tim said, oh, no, that won't work. And he's right. It's a bad idea. Because a mushroom anchor, if it's getting pulled on hard enough that it's pulling in one direction and now being pulled in another direction, it's got to flip over in order to get a grip, and it's got to move a little bit to get a grip. Any anchor is going to be like that. Anytime you change the direction of pull, it's going to get relocated in order to stand up to the new direction of pull. So moorings, stones, for that reason, that's why we use mooring stones. They stay where you put them, except under extreme circumstances. And hopefully you've made the decision regarding their weight that it is sufficient, that your boat won't move it or the buoy won't move it. So, I mean, I think sufficient is not a bad way to go, except that infers that we need to have a trial and error process where we tried this, but it wasn't sufficient, so we're going to have to go with something better. I think 1,000 pounds is maybe overkill. Maybe we should say 500 pounds.
I mean, these are just holding sticks, right? Which I don't,
Little
Well, but then we
markers.
have, in the wintertime, we have ice conditions, or we used to have ice conditions. But if they're poles, the ice won't get a hold of them. That's why we always used mooring
Yeah.
poles in the wintertime, was that the ice could not get.
Built up on
Attached.
it.
Oh, yeah, right.
So,
I think you're real close. The sufficient stone, use that this way.
A stone.
The sufficient, say sufficient size stone, and that's, will cover it.
Okay. They're installed using GPS. Is that reasonable?
Yeah. it's-
Okay. Channel markers upgraded to illuminated green. Winter sticks or comparable.
what's the word before green? Illuminated?
Illuminated green.
Does that mean reflector, or you literally mean it lights up?
Lighted, illuminated.
Oh,
We talked about this, didn't we?
Well,
I can't say as I
and I'm
remember.
confused if you're talking about during the summer or during the winter when we winterize it. What are we talking about?
What the markers, define the markers.
one suggestion was that they stay out year round.
Illuminated, green. We talked about this.
But is this really essential to the problem we have of the location of now talking about, so how are we? I mean, this is frankly a whole new conversation about, so
Steve, we talked about illuminating the markers and you said that a white illuminated would go into the background and would not be easily discernible. Do you remember that?
Well, I vaguely, I know that,
I pointed that out.
yeah.
If Tim said white, I said, at least they were talking about center of the channel. I said, no, why don't we?
Just do green and red on either side.
Well, there's no
Right.
reason the channel describe, the ordinance describes the south side of the channel, the green side of the channel. That's what the ordinance describes. And then from there over it needs to be at least 75 feet. So by the fact that the ordinance is describing the south side of the channel, why don't we just say, okay, the green side is the side that we're gonna focus on? Because that's that's where the alignment.
I gotta go. I got another meeting with Dave St. Laurent.
Illuminated?
Yeah, as far as illuminating, this has been an illuminating discussion, and I appreciate the time you guys put in.
Yes or no?
Illuminating, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. You want to illuminate the one side? I mean, that's the fact that we're going with an age-old ordinance again. Maybe we should talk about changing the ordinance. Maybe that should be in your, to let the select board know that that's an option. And then we can talk about the pros and cons about either. So to make this a safer and more resilient harbor. Thanks again, guys.
yeah.
Steve, we'll see ya.
Yeah.
I think we need to continue this in the next meeting.
Appears
Now
that way.
now that we're down to,
People are voting with their feet.
Well, we still have a quorum, I think. But,
I don't think the rest of the suggestions were, I mean, they were unusual just because I hadn't heard them before, but you apparently had conversations, but we're just making recommendations anyway. So if there's a cost factor or whatever, the select board can decide something different.
Well, I'd have to look in the ordinance and in the part that talks about how the harbor master is responsible for setting the markers for the channel. I don't think there's any detail regarding what those markers are, or how they're configured, or how they're anchored, or anything about that. I think it's possible we are micromanaging, but it's only a recommendation anyways.
I mean, to some extent.
well, no, the ordinance is not a recommendation.
No, but how
What we say is a recommendation, but what,
Right, but if we're micromanaging regarding what the markers should look like and what they should be anchored with, the mechanics of the placement of those.
I'm not sure that needs to be in the ordinance.
No,
We're not writing
No.
ordinance here. We're submitting
Well-
recommendations for how to straighten out the channel.
So let me just ask, currently, in January, is the channel marked the same way it is in the summer? Or is it just marked like moorings are to know where the,
There are no marks in the winter,
okay.
none.
And
They're
do
taken
we-
out, they're
And
taken
do we
out.
feel, and to some extent, if it's not marked in the winter, that takes care of some of the issue of how heavy it needs to be, et cetera, because you don't have anything out there in the storm season. Do we feel strongly that it
ice
should be marked in the winter?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think if we're looking to make improvements in the harbor, that would be a significant improvement. People coming and going in the wintertime would have marks to go by that they could see at night.
The traffic in January is pretty low.
There was talk about people shortcutting the mooring field in the wintertime. And I believe that the problem was the overrunning markers, mooring markers.
Mean them getting chewed up?
Yeah.
Well, that's entirely possible because most of the moorings are marked with pot buoys in the wintertime. They take the top hamper off. They leave the mooring, the bottom chain, the top chain,
It's all on the bottom.
sometimes, yeah, but they remove the pennant, or maybe they don't, but it depends on which mooring inspector you're talking to, but then they tie a piece of pot warp onto the top chain and a pot buoy on the other end of it, and there it is,
Mhm.
which I think is entirely unsuitable in terms of, prudent practice. There's a lot of harbors a lot of moorings inspectors, mooring maintenance people who don't do it that way. They have 6-inch PVC pipes that they've put a cap on the bottom, put an eye bolt in the bottom, poured concrete in, capped it on the top. So they float vertically. They're a cylindrical shape so that the ice can't attach to them and pull the mooring out of position when the ice field moves.
This would be the modern version of a winter stick.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I think we need to wrap it, and the only caution I'd say is that I want the letter to stay focused on, we have a location problem. And not let someone say, oh, look at, they're saying it should be a stick that's 12 feet long or 8 feet long, not get too lost in the details of these recommendations, which really don't have much to do with the location question, which is the real source of our concern.
Okay, so scratch the illuminated markers. And should the markers remain in place year round?
Well,
I think if
I'm
we-
more concerned about bringing the channel into compliance with the ordinance, mostly for and not, I guess,
Right, but if we get them addressed to the question of have an ordinance description that means something, and then we've got those GPS locations of where those are, I don't think we need to get into the seasonality of it, because whether it's the winter or summer, they've got a precise point that they have to set it at. And so I'm not that worried about whether it drifted in the winter or didn't drift, because in theory, every spring, the harbor master should take an hour to go mark the GPS points and make sure that they're on.
I just don't want to water down the impact of our request to the town management about the issue that we have observed, which is that the channel is out of compliance.
Correct. And I'm just saying that if we have 6 bullet points of how to mark the channel wherever it is, that we risk having the conversation be about those points as opposed to the location question.
Right. Well, I think maybe at a later date, if we feel that it's important, that we can
Right.
get
chime
into the, chime in on how we think it ought to be maintained, and maybe make the suggestion that they should be winter marks as well. But
Right.
in the meantime, I would like to stay focused. And what I don't want to have happen is that everybody takes my involvement here as the fact that my only goal is to bring it into compliance with the ordinance. And that's why I worded this the way I did, was that I wanted to indicate that there are very good reasons why the channel was established where it was when the ordinance was written.
That
then
doesn't
we-
matter to you, Bob, though, right?
And that we concur with that reasoning. But if you're not comfortable,
I don't want to go back over the same point, because honestly, I think there's also, any one of us can attend the select board meeting when this gets taken up. To emphasize, we do not think that just because some moorings are out of place, that we should change a good channel, or the opposite, because I think, Steve, just from the time we were out, I was out with you, I think there was more than one or two moorings that looked to be clearly off, and they're not off by 6 feet.
well, and the point too is
More
that
than- they're off by
A lot
than-
more.
A lot more, okay.
I don't want to continue always to be contradictory, but I do like to stick with the facts. And this channel is not just a little bit out of alignment.
Correct.
It's a lot out of alignment. And we've all observed that.
That if it required getting out a compass and all, or some sort of surveying equipment, that would be little. But when you can just stand there and say, well, that's, 400 yards away, and I can tell it's off by a lot.
A lot. Yeah, so it's a lot out of alignment, not just a little bit. And my rough calculations based on the fact that the existing mooring channel, or as it was as of last fall, wasn't a straight line. So we sort of had to average out the placement of those buoys and say, okay, this is where it is now. And
Well,
It's about-
I don't remember looking at the buoy so much as just being able to be there.
Yep.
And look to, I forget now which marker we were looking at the far end, and you could just see that
Yep.
they didn't bear much resemblance.
right. So we're not taking action today then.
The memo will be rewritten and sent out to the committee members for review and comment.
Well, I think it would be important. I think we've gotten far enough down here from what Elliot was saying. Well, we'll take this and this out, and the rest of it, I think it's important that it get to the select board, not waiting until April.
Okay, I do too.
Because
So-
we've got a couple of months where people are not putting their moorings back in, for service use. And, there's some time for them to react instead of saying, well, let's take this up at the end of the next season. We should get it out there.
So can we just put numbers on these sentences and you tell us which ones you want out?
I think didn't you already scratch them? The one that said that we think they were very smart people and that we agree with that result. Those were the two sentences, and the rest of it didn't
Yeah.
bother me.
Right,
So-
well, and I'm redefining the mooring stone, sufficiently sized stone. Restate that. Take out the description of the type of markers.
Yeah, I think that,
But where does that come in, Elliot? I don't understand this. Is this a part of the recommendation that we're making to the select board?
Not
Town-
anymore.
Town management?
I'm taking that out.
No.
I read a list of,
Elliot circulated.
I read a list
Yeah, I
of
didn't-
6
I haven't
recommendations.
seen that. I don't have a copy of that, so I haven't seen
Oh, I
it.
read the list of 6 recommendations. I'll restate them. Channel marker locations
No,
are charted and defined using GPS technology. Channel marker anchors shall be sufficiently sized stones. Channel marker anchors are installed using GPS technology. Mooring service providers are given written notification of the restoration of the channel location, and mooring services must be conducted to accommodate the established channel location. I've deleted the winter year-round part of it. Deleted the type of marker, eliminated marker.
I'm concerned that we're getting involved in the writing of an ordinance there.
We're not writing an ordinance, we're writing a memo, or recommendations for how to straighten out the channel.
Yeah, but that's none of that's required in order to straighten the channel out.
That's all, how to mark the channel wherever it is.
I think if we can just, at this point, leave it up to the harbor master to determine how he wants to place the actual mechanics of what those channel markers are. I mean, I'm not finding fault with, well,
The physical
I
marking.
could find fault, but that's not what I'm doing right now. There are plenty of things to find fault with about how that channel is designated. I'd like to just focus on just the one element right now, that our recommendation is purely concerned with bringing the channel into compliance with the ordinance, and not get involved in writing something about a job description for the harbor master. Because, and that's why I earlier referred to the part of the ordinance that does refer to, it's the harbor master's, part of his job description is to maintain the channel markers seasonally. And that's in the ordinance. But if we get involved in how to tell, are we adding to that job description in the ordinance?
No, I'll take out all of the stuff about how to do it. I do want to leave in the part about giving written notification to the mooring service providers
Good, sure. Well, that's part
so
of
that they know that the channel is out of line and it's going
Yeah.
to be restored.
And we can, and I'm not against those recommendations, Elliot, just to be clear. I'm all in favor.
I'm not going to write a job description for the harbor master. He can figure out how to do it himself.
Elliot, I think the thing about letting the mooring people know that there's an issue sooner rather, the select board doesn't have to decide exactly what to do about the incongruence, but they should make sure that the mooring servicers are aware there's a problem. So one of them might say, fine, I can easily move this over here and then I don't have to worry about what the select board does.
Okay.
I'll reiterate, Elliot, I'm all in favor of all of those points that you made. I am. I'm not finding fault with that. I would like very much to pursue that at a later date. But I think given the time element that we're creeping up on within a month or so, they're going to start putting, revamping the mooring field and putting rubber balls on and pennants and coming out of winter mode and going into summer mode. And I think that I acknowledge and respect the work that you've put into the changes in how these markers should be put together. And I think that they're all good ideas and I'm in favor of all of them. And I'm okay with taking out some of the verbiage, but if we could just go through this one time as to how it's going to be presented, then we can all go our separate ways. I'm not clear on what's been removed from my draft.
You have a sentence, channel location based on sound logic by experienced people. That would be gone. We have carefully reviewed and have, for the same reasons, agree with the original ordinance. That would be gone.
All of the points in Ron's email have been included in the original of this memorandum in one way or another.
So you don't want to agree with the drafters, the original drafters?
Correct. I don't disagree either. I'm just saying we haven't really done that.
Okay, so we're taking out the two sentences in the middle.
Yes.
Ron, that's not the memo. There's
is-
the memo.
But this is the memo I was assigned to
Yes.
write.
Okay. I suggest that Elliot is the chair, whether it's your memo, his memo, or a combined memo, send us what we think is the as of today's conversations version, that hopefully by Thursday or Friday, everyone has replied to the email saying, looks good. and off it goes.
Okay.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you. You worked very hard here. And you